After Richard Goodall's special performance, it's important to note just how much of an impact his impressive vocals have made around the world.
When Richard Goodall stepped onto the America's Got Talent stage, everything about him screamed ordinary, a school janitor in simple clothes, soft-spoken, humble, and visibly nervous. But the moment he took a breath and released the first note of "Don't Stop Believing," millions felt something shift. The crowd erupted. The judges rose to their feet, and Simon Cowell, who rarely shows raw emotion, stared in astonishment. Overnight, Richard became the unexpected hero of AGT, a symbol of hope for everyday people who dream big but never dare to take that step. But what happened after the applause stopped? What happened when the cameras stopped rolling, the lights dimmed, and Richard returned home to a life that had suddenly changed forever? Behind the scenes, his journey was far more complicated, emotional, and surprising than viewers would ever imagine. The truth is that Richard Goodall's story didn't end when the AGT episode aired. It began there. In this documentary, we uncover the real story of what Richard faced after AGT, the sudden fame, the emotional pressure, the unexpected setbacks, the heartwarming victories, and the life-changing decisions that shaped his future. Some moments will inspire you. Others will break your heart. And a few will reveal the reality of fame that TV never shows. This is the untold truth of Richard Goodall's life after AGT, and is far more powerful than anyone realized. When Richard Goodall walked out onto the America's Got Talent stage, most viewers didn't expect history to be made. He wasn't a polished performer with flashy outfits or a dramatic backstory crafted for TV. He was simply a middle-aged school janitor from Indiana, a man who spent years cleaning hallways, unlocking classrooms, and encouraging children who adored him. His life was quiet, predictable, and deeply rooted in the community he loved. Yet beneath that modest exterior lived a voice that had been waiting decades to be heard. From the moment Richard said hello to the judges, there was an air of sincerity about him. He didn't pretend to be anything he wasn't. He didn't chase sympathy. He didn't rehearse a heroic speech. Instead, he stepped into the spotlight with gentle nervousness and genuine humility, too. Traits that instantly won over the audience before he even sang a note. But when the music began and Richard delivered his first powerful line of "Don't Stop Believing," everything about him changed in an instant. The judges were stunned. The crowd erupted. His voice, rich, emotional, and overflowing with authenticity, cut through the arena like a lightning bolt. This wasn't just good singing. It was pure heart. It was every dream he had tucked away suddenly bursting open. When his performance ended, the entire room rose to its feet in a standing ovation that seemed to last forever. And when Simon Cowell awarded him the golden buzzer, the impact was immediate and unforgettable. Richard's entire life transformed in one moment. Within hours, the clip went viral around the world. Millions watched the man from Indiana sing with a passion that resonated deeply with people of all ages. Social media exploded with support. News outlets covered his story. Fans wrote messages telling him how much his voice inspired them. Overnight, Richard went from being known only by students and coworkers to being recognized globally as a symbol of hope, perseverance, and unexpected brilliance. But behind the overwhelming support was a wave of responsibility Richard had never experienced before. Fame hit him faster than he was prepared for. Those who knew him best say he was both thrilled and terrified. He had worked a simple job all his life, and suddenly he was expected to perform on national stages, give interviews, and carry the emotional expectations of millions who believed in him. It was a transition that came with excitement, but also tremendous pressure. And while the AGT production team guided him through the immediate aftermath, the reality of juggling sudden celebrity with his everyday life quickly became overwhelming. Richard had to return home to messages, requests, and offers that flooded in nonstop. Friends, family, and students were ecstatic for him, but even they saw the emotional weight he was carrying. His routine life, once quiet and predictable, had been replaced by uncertainty, excitement, and fear of the unknown. Still, Richard embraced the moment with the same humility that defined him. He didn't let success change who he was. He continued visiting his school, greeting children, and maintaining the warmth that had always made him beloved in his hometown. But behind the smiles, he knew his life was no longer the same. Everything had shifted, and the journey ahead would test his courage, his resilience, and his belief in himself more than anything before that this was only the beginning of what really happened after AGT, a chapter filled with unexpected twists, emotional breakthroughs, and challenges Richard never anticipated. After the golden buzzer moment, Richard Goodall's life shifted from slow and predictable to fast, noisy, and overwhelming. What television audiences rarely see is the emotional whirlwind that follows such a dramatic rise to fame. For Richard, who had spent decades living a quiet life as a janitor, the rapid changes were as thrilling as they were terrifying. He went from sweeping school floors to being stopped in grocery stores for photos. From cheering on students during lunch hour to being asked for autographs by strangers. The attention was positive, but it was also intense, far more intense than he had prepared for. One of the greatest pressures came from expectations. Fans around the world began calling him the voice of the people, the real-life hero, and the greatest golden buzzer in years. While these compliments were heartfelt, they also created a new burden. People now expected perfection. Every performance had to be flawless. Every appearance had to top the last. Richard, who had always sung for joy rather than recognition, suddenly felt responsible for millions of hearts cheering him on. The weight of that responsibility often left him awake at night, wondering if he deserved the love pouring in. Then came the media attention. Interviews, live streams, articles, radio shows, everyone wanted a piece of Richard's story. For a man not used to cameras, the sudden need to speak publicly was overwhelming. His natural shyness made these interactions draining, and each interview pulled him further outside his comfort zone. While he remained polite and gracious, those close to him noticed how exhausted he became behind the scenes. Yet fame wasn't the only challenge. There was also the transition from his old life to his new one. Richard loved his job at the school. He loved the kids, the staff, and the routine. Leaving that behind, even temporarily, felt like losing part of his identity. People often assume that fame replaces old joys, but for Richard, fame felt more like leaving behind a familiar home to live in a world he didn't fully understand. He missed the simple moments, greeting students in the morning, chatting with teachers, eating lunches in the break room. The spotlight didn't replace these comforts, it magnified how much he valued them. Financial uncertainty became another concern. While a GT brought exposure, it didn't instantly guarantee long-term income. Music careers are unpredictable, and Richard knew little about contracts, management, or negotiating. Offers came in rapidly, some genuine, others exploitative. Without experience in the entertainment industry, he had to navigate a world where not everyone had good intentions. His family became a protective circle, helping him decide which opportunities were real and which ones were traps designed to take advantage of his newfound fame. Despite the challenges, Richard also found moments of profound joy. Letters from fans told him how his voice helped them through grief, depression, and loneliness. Teachers wrote about how his story inspired students to pursue their dreams. Family said his performance brought them together in ways they hadn't felt in years. Realizing that his voice had touched so many hearts gave Richard a deep sense of purpose. It reminded him why he loved singing in the first place, not for fame, but for connection. Still, behind the applause were moments that nearly broke him. He struggled with anxiety before big performances, fearing he wouldn't live up to expectations. He questioned whether he belonged on such a major stage. And there were nights he thought about walking away, returning to the safety of his old life. But each time doubt crept in. Messages from fans and the memory of that AGT moment pulled him back. As Richard continued to navigate fame, he learned that dreams come with challenges, that success demands sacrifice, and that staying true to oneself is often the hardest part of the journey. But he also discovered strength he never knew he had, a strength that would shape everything that happened next. When the confetti settled and the stage lights dimmed, Richard Goodall found himself standing at a crossroads he never expected to face. For years, the simplicity of his life had been both his comfort and his identity. He woke up early, walked into the same school hallways, and greeted children who depended on him not just to keep their school clean, but to keep their spirits high. But after America's Got Talent, everything familiar suddenly felt distant. The world had changed for him almost overnight, and now he had to figure out how to live inside that change. At first, Richard tried to return to his regular life, believing that the fame would fade quickly. But it didn't fade. It grew. Parents who had never noticed him before now stood in the hallways asking for autographs. Children followed him around, telling him that they saw him on TV. Teachers and staff treated him like a celebrity. What used to be an unnoticed job became the spotlight of the entire school. And while the attention was kind, it was overwhelming. Richard liked making people happy, but he wasn't used to all eyes being on him. Then came the invitations. Small town concerts, regional events, local news segments. Fans wanted to hear him sing "Don't Stop Believing" live. Event organizers wanted him on their stages. Some offered more money for a single performance than he made in weeks at the school. It was flattering, exciting, and terrifying all at once. For the first time, Richard was faced with a real choice. Stay in the security of the life he had always known, or step into an uncertain world built completely on his voice. Behind the scenes, he struggled with something few people ever knew. Fame doesn't just change how others see you, it changes how you see yourself. Richard had always defined himself as the nice janitor who liked to sing. He was comfortable in that identity because it didn't ask for much. But now the world was asking him for more, and he wasn't sure he had the courage to give it. His phone buzzed constantly. Emails poured in. People reached out not because they knew him, but because they wanted something from him. For a man who had always valued humility, it felt unnatural. He didn't know how to say no, and saying yes to everything quickly exhausted him. Invitations to interview, to perform, to collaborate, to record music, they came faster than he could process them. He had gone from an ordinary routine to a schedule packed with decisions, deadlines, and pressure. And then there was the emotional toll. Richard had always been open about being shy, sensitive, and sometimes insecure. The public's love was heartwarming, but it was also intimidating. He received hundreds of encouraging messages, yet mixed among them were harsh comments from strangers who critiqued his voice, his story, even his appearance. Richard had never experienced hurt from people he didn't know, and those comments weighed on him far more than he ever admitted. Through all of this, one thing kept him grounded: the kids. Whenever he returned to his old school, they treated him like the same gentle, dependable Richard they had always known. They didn't see fame, they saw family. Their hugs, drawings, and excitement reminded him that life didn't have to be complicated. They reminded him why he started singing in the first place: to make others smile. But the biggest turning point came when Richard realized something important. He didn't have to choose between fame and normal life. He could build something new, something balanced, meaningful, and deeply personal. So he began working on music, not for the world, but for himself. He collaborated with local musicians, wrote songs about hope and resilience, and made decisions guided by his heart instead of expectations. As Richard Goodall stepped further into the next chapter of his life, he began to understand something he had never fully grasped before. Fame may come from a single moment, but lasting purpose comes from what you do after the applause stops. And for Richard, that purpose slowly revealed itself in ways he never expected. Despite the whirlwind of attention, Richard made a decision early on. He didn't want to become someone he wasn't. Many AGT stars fall into the trap of chasing trends, rushing into contracts, or changing their image to impress record labels. But Richard refused to let the industry mold him. He wasn't a manufactured celebrity. He wasn't an overnight product. He was a man who had lived a simple, honest life, and he wanted his music to reflect that. So instead of diving headfirst into commercial deals, he took his time. He surrounded himself with people he trusted, people who valued his authenticity, not just his voice. One of the most surprising outcomes of his AGT journey was the new community he formed. Fans from across the country began reaching out, not just because they loved his singing, but because they felt connected to his story. Parents told him he inspired their children to believe in themselves. Elderly fans said his performance reminded them of the music they grew up with. Teachers told him he showed the world that kindness still matters. Richard realized that he wasn't just a singer, he had become a symbol of hope for people who felt overlooked or underestimated. This realization sparked a powerful idea in him. Instead of disappearing from the spotlight or drowning in it, he decided to use it in a way that stayed true to who he was. He started performing at charity events, especially ones that supported schools, children, and mental health causes. He felt deeply connected to these missions because he understood what it meant to feel invisible. For years, he had been the man who quietly swept floors while others walked past him, never imagining he had a world-class voice. Now he wanted to help others find their own hidden strengths. Eventually, Richard began working on his first full-length music project. Not a studio-polished, industry-perfect album, but a collection of songs that reflected his heart. Songs about courage, self-worth, and the everyday heroes the world often overlooks. He recorded much of it in small local studios, working with musicians who treated him like family rather than a product. The process was slow, emotional, and deeply personal. But for Richard, it was the first time he felt like his music truly belonged to him. The support he received along the way was overwhelming. Fans crowdfunded some of his projects. Local businesses helped sponsor small concerts. Schools invited him to speak and share his story with children who needed encouragement. Richard soon discovered that his journey wasn't just about singing. It was about showing people that it's never too late to start over. Never too late to dream, and never too late to believe in yourself. And while he didn't win America's Got Talent, Richard gained something far more meaningful, a new sense of identity. The world no longer saw him as just a janitor. They saw him as a man who proved that dreams don't have expiration dates. And Richard now saw himself as someone capable of more than he ever imagined. He carried that confidence with him everywhere he went. But perhaps the most touching part of his journey is what he chose to keep. Despite the fame, the new opportunities, and the building career, Richard never abandoned the life that shaped him. He still visits his old school. He still checks in on the kids who once saw him sweeping hallways. He still sings the same songs that made him smile long before the world ever heard of him. His fame may have changed his path, but it didn't change his heart in the end. What really happened to Richard Goodall after AGT wasn't a downfall, a scandal, or a mystery. It was something far more beautiful. He discovered a new purpose. He found a new community. And most importantly, he learned that true success isn't measured by trophies or prize money. It's measured by the lives you touch when you choose kindness, courage, and authenticity.